And when you deliver more than that's expected of you, words do pass around about your credibility and your capability. So people do know who you are and people do acknowledge that you have that reputation.
Hello and welcome to the Mentors Edition. I'm Michelle Chikanda, and today we're going to be trying to answer the age-old question, which is, should I stay or should I go? Oftentimes in our careers, we feel like the only way we can get further ahead, that we can speed up our career trajectory, if you like, is to move to a different organization. And today I'm going to be speaking to a woman who, in my opinion, is a force of nature. She has proven that you don't have to do that there can be great fulfillment from staying in one organization, but allowing yourself to grow with and within that organization. Anjana Srinivasan is currently the Wealth Model Transformation Lead in the UK. When we last spoke, she was the COO of Global Marketing for HSBC. So even since we last spoke, she's moved roles, she's been promoted again. We cannot keep up with this woman. What I love about Anjana's story, though, is she talks about the power of your mindset. She talks about, how she has a system for what it takes to succeed. And I want to share her story, mainly because it's all about how she managed to get visibility within one organization. Sometimes we feel like we are not seen. Sometimes we feel as though there is nothing we can do in our organization. And what I love about Anjana's story is that it gives the power back to you. So here you go, grab a pen and paper, get ready to take notes. I know I'm old school. Some of us take notes on our gadgets, but do what you need to do, because this is so jam-packed full of inspiration and ideas and wisdom. And the way that she describes her journey from India to dominating in the UK is something that you have to see. I'm not going to say any more. Here is Anjana. Okay, Anjana, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited about, our conversation. Having spoken before, I know that there's so much you have to share. But I guess I have to start from the beginning, because there's always the assumption that, somebody was born this way. Is it nurture versus nurture, etc.? So tell us a little bit about your childhood. Tell us a bit, how did you grow up? What kind of household? And what sort of lessons were instilled as you as a child? How did this all begin?
Sure, Michelle, and thank you so much for having me. It's going to be really nice, I'm sure. It was wonderful to speak to you the other day as well. The first thing that comes to my mind about how I grew up was happy, right? The atmosphere at home was with lots of people coming. We were a very welcoming family of people across all ages, because we lived as 3 generations in one roof. So granddad's friends, dad's friends, my friends, my brother's friends, my mom's friends. We had everyone coming home. So the house was always buzzing with people. The kitchen was always running full time. Everyone who came home mostly had a meal or a drink before they left. So that was something which was really, really part of home. The other thing was there was plenty of music across genres. We were a musical family. We used to almost describe ourselves as the Wontroff family. And there was singing. My brother played the guitar. My dad used to play the harmonica. And so we were a very musical family. So and of course, I made some greatest of friends in school. They are my closest of friends even today. So I have friendships of more than 40 odd years, which I'm really, really happy and proud about. So in many, many ways, I'd just say happy, very, very happy. I was the youngest in the house. My granddad's pet grandchild and only granddaughter. And we were incredibly close. So my granddad and I shared a lot of time together. And when you ask me about values, I think when you live under 3 generations under one roof, it's not something that you're so conscious about. I think it comes through very naturally. So I would say care, respect, and diversity of thought and outlook was something that I over the years have realized was instilled during that childhood phase of growing in a family such as ours. So that was something that I would call as my values, and they just get instilled in you.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about, being the only grandchild. You know, being a girl is often seen as a burden. What was that like for you, being that dynamic? You know, there's lots of cooking happening in the house, there's lots of music, what was your role in that? And how did you feel about being a girl? I mean, we probably don't think about it when we're much younger, but what was that experience like for you?
So I think unusual for our family, there were always fewer girls than boys. So I was the only granddaughter. So my granddad had two other grandchildren and they were sons. So I think I was special in that way. So I didn't necessarily have that feeling of being girl and being different. Because I was a girl, there was an element of extra special in that household. And so there was always that feeling of being that, that one exclusive one. And when you talk about girl and cooking and things like that, my mom had a very different view for me. So she didn't necessarily teach me how to cook, Michelle. For someone of that generation, she decided that kitchen hours were not something that I must have. She probably had bigger dreams for me, and she believed that I could do much more than that. And somewhere in her mind, culinary skills was something that you need to pick when there is an absolute need to, not something that's a must have. Interestingly, I never cooked till almost my 40th year. I started only after that. And I would say that the pandemic has been the one that's actually honed my cooking skills because we've had no choice. So she was absolutely right. In many ways, I believe I lived her dreams. But cooking was not something that I was involved in during that home, in that period during my childhood.
Okay, so there's magic in that, because I mean, most parents, when you know, a woman of that time not teaching her daughter how to cook, for me, strikes me as what's the word I'm looking for?
Unusual.
Not just unusual, but before her time, right? And also, let's be realistic, the dynamic, the cultural implications of that, right? And a woman just saying, no, my daughter doesn't need to cook, which is the truth.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know, being a thought leader in that respect, and that being given to you, a precious gift given to you at an age.
I would also add an element of boldness, Michelle, because I think it takes courage to actually, make some of those choices. And the choice she made was, no, I don't need to teach you this. This is something that you can pick. There are other skills that we can focus on, and that you're someone more than just being able to, manage a kitchen. And that requires an element of, like you say, forward thinking ahead, and then being able to be different from what others would expect in that time. So
Right.
I'm really grateful for that. And I'm glad that I've been able to live her dreams in more ways than one. And of course, today I do cook reasonably well, and it's something that I picked up only now.
Yeah, you're just a caveat, but it's right. There's a lot of the times when we are younger, I certainly was told you have to know how to run a household, right? You have to know how to cook, you have to know how to clean. But again, anybody can acquire those skills. What your mother gave you was the ability to say, focus on other things. Focus on the things that won't necessarily come your way by default, and that is a precious gift. And I love that. And I think that she taught you to be okay, I guess, by that, by not teaching you how to cook. She taught you to be okay to not accept everything, right? Why should you be able to cook because you're a girl?
Indeed.
Totally. And I loved that. I absolutely love that. Let's move on a little bit, because there was another person in your childhood who shaped your thinking in a non-linear way.
Yes, and I recall our conversation when we last spoke. So my dad's youngest sister, she lived with us, and she was born with cerebral palsy. And in hers, of course, she was born at a time when she lived 44 years with that condition. And her cerebral palsy was probably one of the extremes where her ability to move was negligible, as in she couldn't move without assistance. She had a vocabulary of probably just 10 words that could just express whether she had needs. She definitely had a little kiss that would express gratitude. And so she could just, smack her lips in a very sweet way. But I think one thing that she had, which was really astounding, was she was perpetually with a smile, a happy face. And so when I mentioned happy at the start, I think somewhere without very consciously thinking about it, because she lived for the first 15 years of my life. But when I look back, I think in many ways, there was this, if she can be happy, everyone can. And somehow that became part of my thinking that I'm mostly a person, I'm always with a smile. And I think I'll also add here that my dad has also had that influence on me in quite a few ways. And he would always talk about things being, sometimes preordained or life will throw at you curved balls, right? And what he instilled was what's in your control is the attitude you choose as these unfold. That was true even when he was diagnosed with terminal stage of cancer. He reminded me about it and said that the attitude you choose as things unfold is in your gift. So take it in your stride. And so I think between them, somewhere there is this positive attitude that's just become part of me, that I take things in my stride. I look at things in with a glass half full attitude. I look at it with perspective, saying if she could be happy, I can be happy. And you look at the sum of everything, not that one moment where things will go up and down in life. So there is that positive mindset that has got instilled as part of my upbringing, but very unconsciously, Michelle. It's just over the years when I've reflected, I realized that those are things that have actually formed part of my wiring.
Absolutely. But what we do is when we dissect these things and we unpick these things, those of us that have children can actually see some of the things that they can instill in their own children, right? What I
No
love about that is, so you grow up, you have a grandfather who says you're a girl, therefore you're extra special, which is contrary to the norm. You have a mother who says you're a girl, therefore you're not going to cook. Contrary to the norm. And you have an aunt who has very little for a lot of us from the outside looking in, she has very little, but she's always smiling, teaching you about positivity. And then you have a father who says life's going to throw things at you, but you're gonna overcome. It's within your gift. So this all happens before you are, I don't know, whilst you're in your teens, whilst you're a child. So tell us a little bit about what happens, when you're thinking about what am I going to study now? You're a little bit older, and then you decide to choose accounting. Why did you decide to go down that route?
So I come from a family of accountants. My brother and I are the seventh generation accountants. So my granddad's great granddad, I believe, was the chief accountant of the village, right? So I did pick finance for my undergrad, clearly out of elimination that I would be better in that than the sciences and or arts. So that's how I chose to study finance for my undergrad. But studying to be a chartered accountant was not my first choice at all, Michelle. I had seen my brother study to be a chartered accountant, a bright, intelligent guy who spent 18 hours studying for that course. And in many ways, it was somewhat intimidating to think about, oh my God, if that's the kind of effort that's required, I'm not too sure whether I want to follow that path. But as I finished my undergrad, when you start to look at this, it cannot be ending here. You ought to look at what next. And my husband, whom I was dating back then, was very clear that, you need to think of what's next. This is when my brother actually convinced me that I could actually take CA as a course. And I think one thing that he did tell me then was, and knowing very well that I was rather intimidated by the hours he spent, was that he saw in me an ability to be quite focused and structured. And he said, those two attributes that you have will actually make you see you through this exam. You might do it slightly differently than I, but then you have the ability to do it as well. So I'd say he instilled that element of confidence. Now, of course, when I got into the course, it was a roller coaster ride. It's very demanding. It requires the same amount of effort. I don't believe anyone is spared of that effort at all. But when I look back, I'm glad he convinced me to do it because I've had a fantastic career. And I'm glad that I did take that path. It felt a bit hard, and it's one that no one escapes in terms of the effort you need to put in. But it was being incredibly rewarding. He was my first boss, so he was the most demanding of all. and the hardest I've had. He knows that. I've said that to him multiple times. I think he takes great pride in who I am today. And so whenever there's a recognition, he doesn't fail to acknowledge that she was once my apprentice. So, yes, I mean, he had a big influence, but that's how I went about actually picking this course and then completing the course as well.
I think I absolutely love that. What I love about that story is sometimes people see things in you that you can't see in yourself. You
Mhm.
saw that course and you were like, there's no way. I'm not going to survive. But he was like, no, actually look at your strengths, and your strengths actually lend themselves really well. And he communicated that to you. And I think, again, your childhood and your upbringing and the family that you have were undoubtedly your greatest source of wealth. You know, being able to be given such gifts and being, you know, pushed in the right direction, because some people might have resented the fact that they come from a family of accountants and having to do that. But actually the way that it was done, you know, the way that your family and you went about it, and the gifts that they gave you along the way, makes it special. And it's a moment for, sometimes we always want money or to grow up to be wealthy, but sometimes the richness is actually in those familial experience, in those words of wisdom, in that guidance, that sometimes we don't appreciate because we don't necessarily spend the time reflecting on it.
Mhm.
And I love that in your story, it is essentially what has made you you.
No
All
doubt. No
different
doubt.
people in these different ways. So no amount of books could have taught you that. No amount of money could have given you that. And so this is again another example of the richness that can come from our relationships, and the power in them. Okay, so you then start to work for the family business, and then what happens?
Okay. Yes, so the 3-year course was intense. And then I took a short break after I sat for my CA final. So rather, as I finished my apprenticeship, I also married my childhood sweetheart before I took my final exams. Now, that could feel a bit, in terms of timing, is this the right thing to do?
It
Because I
sounds
think
like
there
sabotage.
yeah, I don't know whether everyone saw it as in, potential sabotage. There were definitely jitters in terms of how am I going to manage the excitement of being a newlywed and tackle a course as challenging as that. And I think somewhere for me, it was the confidence that the support I have from my to be husband and his family is going to be something that's going to make me see this through. Also, I think not being in my own home where there are already accountants, qualified accountants towering over me, sometimes felt like probably less of pressure to actually, form my own path. And so being part of my husband's family and their incredible support, I think I had all the continued encouragement to do whatever was needed to get the right outcome.
Uh-huh.
So I had no trepidations at all. I was very clear I was doing the right thing. I know others did, but it wasn't something that I was concerned about because this was in my control and this was something that I had. And in fact, when I did clear, Michelle, my dad congratulated my husband along with me because he felt that without his support, it wouldn't have been something that would have been possible. So I was telling you, I took a short break after I did my exams. And this was the time I was reflecting on what next. And in those 3 years of
In
work,
that short break, you quit the family business. You quit your job.
I didn't quit the job yet. I wrote the exams, I finished my apprenticeship, and
Uh-huh.
I decided that till the results are out, I'm going to take a break.
Okay.
And during that period of taking a break, it was a period of reflection, as in, depending on what the result and outcome is going to be, this is probably my time to think about, who is Anjana? And is Anjana more than daughter of, sister of?
Yeah.
And I started to think about how do I start to make a name for myself? How do I carve my own? And that's about the time I started to form this feeling that I need to move away from the family firm to establish my own reputation, my own credibility, my own worth.
Mhm.
And so when my results were out and I knew I had cleared, I spoke with my brother and I said, I think I've made my mind to move into industry. I want to work for a bit elsewhere. And he was perfectly fine with it. But his only advice was till you land that role, continue in the family firm because you'll continue to gain some experience. So continue to do that. when you do land a job, then of course I'll let you go. And somewhere there was a feeling that I might come back, and but here I am, near 20 years.
20 something years later, and you never look back. So you obviously then move on and you start working at HSBC. How did you get that job? And, what was happening in your newlywed? What happened? How did you get the job at HSBC?
So HSBC was just about setting up their back office operations across India in those times. And there was definitely one large center that was coming up in Bangalore. My friend just happened to mention saying, hey, I'm happy to drop your CV because the recruiters are right next to my office, and there's just a drop box where anyone can drop their CV. So she did that on my behalf. And then, of course, there was 7 or 8 rounds of interview, if I recollect, before I landed my role as assistant manager operations in their cards division. I was super excited, to be part of such a big brand, an international bank. And as I discussed with my brother, that when the time comes, I would leave. It was nicely well-rounded because from the time knew I had the job till I had to take it, I had approximately about 6 to 8 weeks time. So it was good for me to do that handover. I took another 3-4 weeks of break before I started off with HSBC. And one story that I usually share is 6 weeks into HSBC, my first proper job, I'm pregnant. And now you can imagine all the thoughts that's racing in my head, right? It's like even before the start, are you trying to put a full stop or a pause or whatever it is, right? And it's a combination of happiness. There's a combination of happiness, awkwardness, because the first thing you want to speak with your manager about is maternity leave.
Could you try again?
And then, of course, there is this, new place of work. How do you actually navigate all that? And to add to the mix, my husband actually gets an opportunity elsewhere in another city, and he's looking at a potential relocation. So there is everything that's added to the mix. Literally, when my dad prepared me for curveballs, there were many of them coming at the same time, right? And so all of these things are happening. And I must share that my best friend's mom had once told me that, because she knew I got married, I qualified to being an accountant, I'm going to start working. And so she told me that even if you were to become a mom along the way, don't think of it being as something that needs to stop you for the capabilities you have. Motherhood is something that you can do alongside a full-time job, because she had a career. Unlike my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom, she was a mom who worked and managed having children. So she put that thought in me saying, don't necessarily quit. So what I decided to do was, I have 8 months plus to think all of this through. Let me just focus and enjoy what I'm doing now and just focus on the job.
Yeah. When you first told me about, getting pregnant, I thought, your poor manager, she's just recruited this superstar. And 6 weeks later, the superstar is, by the way.
I mean, you won't be surprised. She actually said, don't you know the story of the birds and the bees? And you should have given me some more time and some more notice. But she was incredibly supportive, right? The first thing when I did tell her was, she's like, you're fantastic. Let's see this phase through. I know that you're going to be eventually relocating. Let's talk about it when the time comes. So the 8 months that I did have was a job that I loved. It was fantastic. We had the most amazing people. We were constantly learning. We were growing. And I did not focus on anything other than excelling. And if it's one of the three things that, has stood by me, is when you're in a current role, do not compromise on performing to your best abilities in that role. And that's something that I have maintained throughout in every role I've taken. And so that 8 months for me was proving my worth, that before I go off on maternity leave, there is enough about me that can be acknowledged as capable of retaining and having, even on a continued basis, albeit the fact I might have to move to a new city. So when the time came for me to take off, she said, take your time off, do not quit, we will work something out for you in that new city, but when the time is right, but just enjoy this period now, take that time off. And so that's how she let me go. Today, if you think about it, of mentors, sponsors, they're concepts that we talk about so comfortably. Back in the day, we didn't necessarily acknowledge the roles of what these people actually played for us. And for me, she was a mentor, sponsor, and something more. Because when the time did come after I had taken my break, 4 months into my maternity break, she had reached out to my husband and said, "Looks like there's an opportunity coming up."
So your sponsor, your manager, reaches out to your husband, not to you, because she's strategic. I guess when you told me this, I thought, wow, what a strategic move, because you're there in baby brain mode, fully absorbed. So she says, okay, I need my superstar back now. And she reaches out to your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens?
All right. So by this time, I've already moved cities, right? I've taken a 2-month-old infant and I've moved from Bangalore to Hyderabad, right? And it's much harder to have your baby outside of you than inside of you because there's just so much you're coping with, right? My brain was perpetually filled with when's the next feed. I wasn't necessarily thinking about my career, next steps, or any of it, right? I was trying to be the best mom ever without feeling overwhelmed with those responsibilities. So that was the only thing in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have my ex-manager reaching out to my husband saying, "Hey, can you go home and give your wife a break? Because I want to speak to her. I think there is an opportunity coming up." So it's so strategic of her to actually, put in that onus and responsibility on the husband saying, "You go home, relieve her of childcare for a bit. I need to have a peaceful conversation." And in that conversation, she talks to me about an opportunity with the promotion and says that I'd be fantastic for that role. And I just need to turn up for the interview because she said she'd got the right permissions to get an HR sign off because no one returns from maternity with a promotion.
Exactly.
So she needed a sign off because I had not even worked for one whole year in the bank. It was just about 9 months. And she updated my CV and she applied for me. So when you think of this person, they're more than just a mentor, sponsor.
Okay, so but and I agree. I mean, this woman sounds like a force of nature. Not only was she strategic, but she saw something in you,
Mm-hmm.
and also she saw an opportunity to grow the business at the same time using the skill set that you brought. One question that everybody is wondering is, okay, you were pregnant pretty much straight away. What did you do such that this woman sees all this potential in you, that she's willing to do all of that for you, even though on the face of it, it looks like you let her down by getting pregnant? What did you do in that period of time? What mindset did you have? What was happening?
So in that focus in the role that I had, and because I was probably the only accountant in the mix of people she recruited, she'd given me an extra specific task on setting up a unique unit within the operations team, because that required an eye for detail, that required something which needed to be set up from A to Z. As part of that, she saw that potential. It's my first time job, it's my first time in the organization, and I'm establishing an entirely new capability within the larger team. Also, within first 4 weeks, I was able to identify, external fraud in that activity. And the bank had had this process for a number of years and externally managed by a third party, and they were not able to detect it. So part of my identification of that piece meant that we instilled fraud training for the process as well. So there was lots of things that could get delivered. The outcome was visible even though it was a very short period of time. And so setting up that separate unit, identifying fraud training as a requirement in this process, because we could save the bank multiple millions of dollars if we do that as part of the process. All of that was just something that came about during that short 9-month period. So I think I had the platform to demonstrate my abilities. And as the opportunities came, I just seized them. And even I recollect having a first career conversation with her. And she was my skip level manager. She wasn't my immediate manager.
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with her, and she's like, would you consider, the next role from an assistant manager to a manager? And I'm like 6 months pregnant, and I'm nodding my head, Michelle, saying yes. Not even thinking about, okay, when is this going to happen? But I'm just saying, yes, I will be ready when the time comes. And so,
I love that you're pregnant this whole time. Most people are like, gas off the pedal. I'm pregnant. Let me just rest. You're like, gas on the pedal. Yes, yes, yes. Let's find opportunities. Let's grow this business. Let's move forward. And whatever comes my way, I'm going to tackle it head on. No,
it was buzzing. Yeah, I was buzzing with energy and positivity. And it was just the most delightful period of my life, in the sense that I enjoyed that phase, and I enjoyed that ability to contribute. I enjoyed some of the recognition I had for those contributions. So it was very, very rewarding. And so I was not gas off the pedal at all. I was more gas on, because I thought, if I have to prove my word, this is the time to prove it. And so taking, foot off would only make things harder. So why do that? So it's not something that I do at all when I start a role. It's like, it's always foot on the pedal, gas pumping, and you get
exactly.
moving.
I absolutely love that. So your manager organizes this new role for you, and you then go in. After maternity, you've got a baby, you've got a very young baby, you've got a new family. How did you navigate that change? Because it's not easy, and a lot of people have to make that transition back into work. You're virtually a different person than you were when you left. How did you navigate that period?
It was simpler, because I got the support of my parents as well. So the moment they knew that I'm signing up for a role again, my mom just decided that I'm packing bags and I'm shifting to your place to help you look after your baby.
Amazing.
Yeah, and she didn't need to check with anyone. It was a call that she took by herself. And my poor dad had no choice but to just follow her. So he had to come along as well. So I think I had that support system at home, which made me think of work with the right focus again. So the fact that you can focus on excelling, because you don't have to worry about home, you don't have to think about a nanny saying it's time, I need to leave, you need to rush back. It was mom and dad at home. And for me, the peace of mind that my child's going to be brought up by whom I was brought up, and he's going to have the benefit of having three generations under one roof, which is what I grew up with as well. So it felt like the right win-win. So there was never that, constant worrying about leaving an infant at home. I had the flexibility of, we lived very close to work. So I had the flexibility to come back for a short while and go back. So it just worked, because I was able to draw the right support at the right time, Michelle. And I think that's the second thing that worked for me, is to be able to use your support system to its fullest self, whether it was my husband, my parents, my mentors, my sponsors, not hesitating to be able to leverage your entire support network. Because if you wish to do something, draw in the support. Don't hesitate, because you are your biggest limitation for most part. And if you know how to draw in the right support, things can actually work for you.
It's about asking for help, right? And saying like, look,
And not being exactly, and not being worried to ask for help, because at the most the answer can be no, but you never know, the answer could be yes as well. And so, don't stop yourself from asking, because if you ask, there's a very good chance you'll get it.
Absolutely.
So,
and if you don't, keep moving as well, right? You find other ways to leverage this. I want to talk about this moment where you go back into work, you've got a promotion. This has happened to you over and over again. You've been with HSBC for over 20 years. So many times throughout your career, you've been thrown into the deep end. This idea of, coming back from maternity leave with a baby, promotion, new job, bigger responsibilities, moving countries. You're now in the UK. Before that, you were in Hong Kong, thrown in at the deep end. How have you navigated this change and this idea that whenever you move, you're moving into more responsibility and into the unknown?
So, it sounds very cliched, but, change is the only constant, and adapting to change can only make you more resilient. Personally, I think I embrace change with excitement and that positivity of what it could look like. And going into a bit of that unknown and being back on learning curve is also an exciting thing for me. So I'm not someone who walks away from that change. I actually jumped right into it. And I think one comes up with your creative best solutions when you are challenged and when you're put in that deep end. And so uh, coming out rising is something that is exciting of that process. And so that's something that I've done. And my roles have made me travel across countries and across cultures. So I have actually watched a number of wonderful people and wonderful leaders that have been able to instill, aspiration in me. I've been inspired by them and so I've drawn from those learnings and those experiences. And I see myself as someone who's perpetually aspiring for something. I don't stop aspiring. So I think of the three things that I mentioned. Third thing for me is it's never made me stopping from aspiring. And so when you're in the waters, jump in and swim across, don't pause and don't worry about drowning, because if you're worrying about it, then you're not going to be swimming. So you're going to just allow yourself to drown. So just keep moving, keep propelling. And, the more you act, even if things do go wrong, you can always course correct.
So it's like using every ounce of energy to focus on the result that you want, rather than wasting energy, losing energy on the things that you cannot
Absolutely.
happen. But tell me this, I mean, you've had so many opportunities, as you've said. How did you manage to gain visibility? Because your roles have been varied across the years. You seem to just go from promotion to promotion to promotion to promotion. How did you manage to do that? Because some of us have had to do that across organizations. How did you manage to achieve this within one organization, gaining that visibility where people say, I want to give Anjana that opportunity? How did you manage to get people to see you?
It comes back to those three things that work for me. But it's a great question, because people do ask me, how do you sustain visibility? And and it's not formulaic at all, because you can build visibility, you can establish credibility and reputation, and then of course if you move from one country to another, it's almost like a taxi meter down again and you're starting again, right? And so you have to really start from the grassroots levels again. But when you build trusting relationships, somehow those capabilities are things that you take along even when you're starting afresh. So you start to look at it once more. So where the visibility is helpful for me is, one is I've always tried to focus, like I said, on excelling in my current role. And when you deliver more than that's expected of you, words do pass around about your credibility and your capability. So people do know who you are and people do acknowledge that you have that reputation. In fact, one of my managers said, I used to be hesitant about talking about mobility because I wasn't too sure whether I can relocate. And so anytime that conversation came, I would shy away from that conversation until one year when I did ask, saying, must I move or must I demonstrate flexibility to move out of the country? And this manager of mine said, your talent will worthy of export. So why would you shy away from thinking about it? And that mechanism of actually communicating mobility to someone is quite reassuring, because you start to look at yourself as talent worthy of export, as opposed to I have to be transferred now.
Yeah.
And that's how I was open about it. And in fact, this entire move to Hong Kong just happened in a very casual instance. I was trying to recruit for an Asia Pacific lead. I wasn't able to find one. So I decided to go to Hong Kong with boots on ground and thinking, okay, let me find my Asia Pacific regional head, sitting here and trying to recruit from there. And, one week in, I'm not necessarily getting the right candidate. And I just casually mentioned to my sponsor, who's been a sponsor now for 15 plus years, he's a role model sponsor. It is something that is unusual in the way he is actually demonstrates that sponsorship. And I just mentioned to him, what, if I do not find this regional head, I might just have to do my global role sitting in Hong Kong. And I say that as a very, very casual remark. And he says,
Yeah.
can you do that? Because if you were to make that move, it will be fantastic for your career. right? And I did tell him that I travel all the time. And he said, there's a different experience you'll gain from just traveling versus actually being moving and living in another country and adapting to another culture. What it'll make of you will be completely different. Of course, I had to come back, engage with the families, speak about what that opportunity looks like. And we were like, if it works for the unit as a whole, let's pack bags and let's move. And that's the same approach we had for 3 years after Hong Kong to do the same to London. So excelling in what you do and making that excellence being visible to all of the stakeholders that matter. Second is drawing that support, not hesitating to speak your mind and not hesitating to ask for support or help, is whether it's from family or from your sponsors or mentors. I've really, really drawn that support. And the last one is not to stop aspiring. There isn't your career is almost like a canvas that doesn't have any ends and boundaries. And the paints are in your hand. You decide how much you want to paint because the canvas will keep flowing. So that's how I look at it in terms of, so you when you think about it that way, you will use all of your abilities to be able to establish that credibility and that relationship with people. And so you sustain that visibility.
I love that. I think that's a really good guide about how to go about thinking about things. But I do have to say that us mere mortals sometimes experience imposter syndrome, right? Okay, fine, I might move to Hong Kong, but can I do it? Oh, now I'm around these big important people. I don't know if I'm worthy of being here, etc. How did you manage to, how do you, or in all those different situations, and I'm sure there's plenty more to come as your star continues to rise, how have you managed to deal with that?
I've never felt like an imposter. It's something that I've had a number of promotions, quick ones at that. And I always felt that the senior leaders who gave me those promotions saw potential in me and believed in my abilities. And that was my responsibility to live up to their expectation. So if I had to start worrying about not being able to do things, then my focus will shift from being excelling in what I need to do and start worrying about things that are honestly inconsequential, because your worries are things that can actually take you down a path which is unnecessary. So when I have had those roles much faster than many others, I have believed that I've had to live up to that expectation. So the focus instantly is about what I can do, what I should be doing to get on to on this up running without necessarily having pauses and worrying about what cannot happen. And that's the fun. Like I said, I embrace that change. So there is that little bit of adrenal rush in trying to figure something out. And it is not necessarily one that pushes me into that imposter syndrome mode at all. So I think I'm quite fortunate. I tell a lot of women whom I mentor saying, do not think about the things you cannot do in a job. No one takes every aspect of a job description A to Z, right? If you're 80%, awesome is good enough. You don't have to be perfect. And over time, you will develop the balance 20%. And we're all one that who progress from starting at some point, and we definitely evolve with those additional inputs and support and learning. And so it is a journey. So you can't expect to be this perfect person in a new role on day one.
Absolutely, and I think that is something that we all crave. We all crave to walk in being the expert, but what we don't acknowledge is that there's no room to grow, and there's no room to run. And that 80% for me, if I have 80%, that's plenty. I always sort of think if I'm 3/4 of the way, 75% of the way,
good enough, indeed, for each one.
Because I have some room to learn, I have some room to grow. I don't want to be 100%.
Indeed. And that 75% is immense for you to even contribute ably in that role, right? And so you're able to show 75% before anyone even realizes that you're equipping yourself with the balance 25. So you might as well focus on, showing them that your 75% is of more value than the 25% you're seeking to learn, because that's the value you're going to gain, but they're already getting 75% of your value.
Yeah, I mean, I want to come to your current job. It's always like this. Maybe next week, or maybe by the time this airs, you'll be in a different role. But I want to talk about your current role. Tell us a little bit about that. As an accountant, we know you have been an accountant, but tell us a little bit about your role now, how you got there. I mean, it will make sense given the conversation we've just had, but tell us a little bit about that. How did you get that role? How did it come about?
Okay, so in 2016, I was part of the bank's flagship program called the Aspiring COO program. So mentally, I had made that transition of moving from risk and control specialist roles to a more leadership type role. And largely because in my risk and control roles, I had equipped myself with a number of leadership capabilities, whether it was change management, people management, finance management, or introducing new technology, new process, etc. So I had built that experience alongside that technical knowledge of risk and control. So landing myself in the Aspiring CEO program was the first time I'd rewired my thinking, saying that could be a career path that I want to take. I also recollect telling my family and almost every senior member in the organization that my next role will be a COO role. So I knew that it was not just to rewiring myself, it was to rewire everyone else's thinking so that when they think of Anjana, she's not just a risk and control expert. She is someone who has gained so much more out of those experiences, that she is got the credibility to actually establish herself as a COO candidate. So doing that, I mean, it took me almost 4 years to land this job, because my sponsor, again, whom I've known for the last 15 years, someone reached out to him saying, I'm looking for a COO of marketing. Do you have someone in mind who can actually fulfill this role in a manner that will be really complementing? So he recommends my name. And then I get tapped on the shoulder saying, hey, there's a marketing COO opportunity here in the UK. Again, I want to be in the UK because my son is just about finishing his grade 12. He's all set to look at university applications and move. So I'm not necessarily keen on moving out of the UK now. Having done those moves from India to Hong Kong and the UK, I'm trying to look at some more stability for the family as a whole. And so this opportunity came up, and I have never done marketing. And so I'm here in the interview trying to sell myself as a first time COO candidate, but I'm trying to draw all the common features of my experiences.
Can I stop you for a moment? This is when all of us go, I can't do it. There's no way. I've never done marketing. This doesn't make sense. Maybe they can give me something in the middle. But what does Anjana do?
I'm looking at it as saying, I haven't done marketing, so I have something new to learn. That's going to be fantastic. I've done back office operations and moved to the business. Now, moving right in the front will give me that total back to front experience. I'm looking at all the learning opportunity I'm going to get. And I know I need to sell myself for that 75% that I already have that will add value to the marketing capabilities. So I'm doing my interview with selling aspects of what I have done, which focuses on customer, data, and growth, and trying to draw parallels saying how the marketing function also looks at customer, data, and growth, but with a slightly different lens. And so here I'm being very upfront with our CMO saying, I'm not a marketer, but I don't believe your COO needs to be a marketer. Your COO needs to be someone who comes with COO attributes. So I'm actually selling myself to be picked up for the skills that I have, knowing very well there are skills that I will learn, which will allow me to grow.
Right, so you put them into a bucket. You put your skills I don't have in the 25%, but here I am telling you about the 75% and how it's going to be amazing for you. I love that. So you didn't see it as a limitation. You saw it as a positive, as an asset to that team.
Totally. And I knew that there is so much value that I can bring to that team. So they are going to benefit with my inclusion into the team. And I'm going to benefit from learning something completely new and different. So I did bring it about as a win-win situation. The nicest thing I think I had was when my CMO left. She left me a thank you card and she said, uh, I've been the best CEO she's had.
Oh,
And given that that was my first CEO role in an entirely new function, I actually treasure that she was actually able to see that 75% value rather quickly. Because if I had worried about building that 25% upfront, then I wouldn't have been able to demonstrate the 75% that I already had that I could contribute. So there's always that conscious thought process around bring in what you're already good at, establish yourself, and along the way, pick up all the new things that need to make that more holistic.
absolutely. Rather than spending the entire time with your eyes, in the rear view mirror, out this window, out that window, focus on going forward with what the skills you already have. I absolutely love that. Okay, so we need to wrap this up now, and I would like to ask you, what advice would you have to share for somebody who is somewhere along this journey? Maybe they are newlywed, about to get married and worried about their career. Maybe they have just had a baby and wanting to go back to work. Maybe I've been in the same organization for, a long time and I need some visibility. Wherever they are in their journey, what would your advice be to somebody who is somewhere along the journey that you went on?
I would say that, I mean, my scenario could be unique and each one's varies, right? And some of it could be common for others as well. And for most women, timing that baby can be a very, very important thing in terms of what it does to their career. But I'd probably just summarize my 3 points of what worked for me. And like I say, it's not, formulaic, but it's definitely something that others can actually look at absorbing because it worked. One is do not stop aspiring. Do not limit yourself to saying, this is what I studied to be, this is what I should be doing all my life. Think about it as how you're evolving and what you're growing to be because you're a very different person 2 decades into your career than where you started. So don't stop aspiring. Draw support. Draw support from your complete network, whether it's family, whether it's friends, your sponsors, mentors, anyone in the organization. Just ensure you draw the support. When you ask, you will get. So do not hesitate from reaching out. And no is also an answer. So it's perfectly fine to acknowledge no also as an answer. And excel in the current job you do. There is nothing greater than demonstrating your worth through your performance. So when you perform in your current job and focus on doing that and being your best, you are definitely only building your credibility. So do not lose sight of having to excel because no one will support you if you're not a performer, right? And it'll limit your aspiration if you're not a performer. So these 3 things somehow go hand in hand.
I love that. I do have to say, I mean, before we wrap up, there is something about you that struck me. Every time you have spoken about a challenge or being thrown in at the deep end, your face lights up. And I have to say, I love that. I'm going to work on rewiring my brain because a lot of us, when we hear challenge, our faces, we lose all that energy. But as you said, the power of focusing on what is within your control and being positive and actually, again, looking at those curveballs that your father taught you about and actually relishing them and using them to say, okay, I'm alive, I'm moving forward, I'm growing, this is why this is happening, is definitely something that I'm going to work on. So thank you for sharing that with me. And thank you for sharing, the gifts and the beauty of relationship and connection in our journey towards driving towards our success and our ambition and our growth. And fulfilling our potential. Anjana, it's been an incredible hour, and I'm so grateful for your time. And I'm sure we will speak again soon and share again soon.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Michelle. I've really enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.